Hi, Cengiz. Welcome to my diversity talks.
Hi.
For the ones who don't know you, let me immediately introduce you because you are my husband. But you're not here today because of your marital status. You're a historian and political scientist. You are the deputy director of the Austrian Institute for International Affairs and the lecturer at the University of Vienna. And you have a regional focus on Middle East and Turkey. Cengiz, you know the story behind these diversity talks. When pandemic started, I got concerned about the impact of COVID-19 on diversity and inclusion because our learning from previous crisis was diversity and inclusion may be easily get neglected in times of crisis. That's why I wanted to talk to people, practitioners, experts working in that field. But the other concern of mine was if there is a risk of a rise of nationalism or xenophobia due to the closed borders. So in our session today, I would like to ask you a couple of questions around that. My first question is, do you think the world has become more diverse from a political point of view?
First of all, thank you for including me into this great project. Has the world become more diverse? Yes and no. I think the world has always been diverse. If you look back into history, diversity was a given and not always also conceived as a problem. I think what the world has seen is with the rise of the idea of national identity, of nationalism, the idea of similarity and the threat that comes from difference, these ideas have changed. I think that with the rise of nationalism and the idea that based on a common language, on a common ethnic background, the suggestion that people share a lot of things has kind of blended out the differences within societies and has put on different groups the pressure to adapt themselves to this norm of similarity. This pressure has been on minorities, on ethnic minorities, but also within, so to say, the majority ethnic group, on women to behave in a certain way, also on men, certainly on immigrants, and so on and so forth. And what we see is nowadays that, of course, this idea of ethnic nationalism is still there, but at the same time, we see a breaking up of these societies, the idea that difference is not a threat, that difference can be also something that is valued and something that might even create a bigger source for creativity, change, and so on and so forth. So what we're seeing is the breaking, the old ideas and constructions of imagined communities based on similarity are still there, but we see shifts within that and a breaking up of these structures. And I think we're going through that process right now.
What do you think? What is playing or is there a significant factor in this shifting?
Well, I think there are several. As my research interest is also very much on the impact of neoliberal interventions, I think that the neoliberalization of societies and economies and markets has also played a bigger role. Because what neoliberalism also suggests is the kind of that the individual should kind of realize his or her dreams in life, and that your individuality is what counts in the market. So on the one hand, we are all forced to be more individual, to put our strengths, individual strengths at the fore. And at the same time, we're still within structures that are kind of actually telling us, you should fit to the norm. School education, or you name it, all these things are still very much shaped by these old structures. And at the same time, the market is kind of pushing people to be more individualistic and to put their identities into the room. And I think another shift that we see within this neoliberalization is that the claim for identity and or claims based on identity, let me put it that way, have somehow replaced socio-economic class-based claims. So we see a decline in social democracy, in leftist class struggle claims, and a replacement of these claims through identity-based claims. So there is less a strong movement for the improvement of, I don't know, workers' rights and so on and so forth, but it has been more divided and diverse, this claim, where different identity groups ask and fight for their piece of the cake and their participation. So the struggle has shifted from class-based struggle to more identity-based struggle. But it's the same struggle, probably, to break up the structures, the hegemonic, dominant power structures.
Cengiz, what do you think? What is really preventing us from accepting and living with people who are different than us? What is it that we are scared of?
Well, I think that is probably also a very human, basic thing, that what you don't know scares you. But putting that aside, I think that at the same time, this is something we are taught. And this brings me back to what I said earlier, that the education school system is very much shaped by the notion of a nation state where different individuals might live, but they share a common idea of that nation and share the common characteristics of that nation. That's an imagination. It has never been true. Just being English, French, German, Turkish doesn't mean that you are the same as your neighbor or anyone else, but it is kind of suggested through textbooks, in school education, also in media and reporting, and also, of course, by nationalist parties, that there is something that is a commonality between me and my neighbor, more than with a neighbor from outside, a foreigner that has moved there, which is actually not true. I might be closer to that neighbor from a foreign country in terms of lifestyle and so on and so forth. But what nationalism suggests is a similarity based on the same national background or ethnic background. And I think that plays a role when people kind of are scared of difference. And then there is another aspect to it, of course, that these power structures I was mentioning are challenged by the claim for inclusion of diverse different groups. So the claim of women to be part of decision-making structures is a threat to those who are currently in power. Or the struggle of Black people in the United States is, of course, a threat to the privilege of white men, for instance. And so you see also these kind of counter struggles against the inclusion of different and diverse groups.
Do you think religion plays an important and significant role in that regard as well?
Yes, it plays a big role, and that has also to do with the end of the Cold War. We see a shift from the threat perception of where it was the capitalist democratic West against the communist and authoritarian East. After the fall of the Soviet Union and the Iron Curtain, we see a shift to identity politics, and identity politics based on the idea that there are fundamentally different civilizations has very much dominated not only international politics, but also public discourses in different countries. So there is a constant, there is a debate about a constant debate about the fears and the threats connected with migration, for instance. And we see within migrant groups a shift in that threat perception, generally speaking, from migrants and foreigners more and more to Muslims. So it's mainly in Western societies that Muslim migrant communities and immigrants are considered as a threat to the perception of the national similarity, unity, community. There is the fear that these kind of established structures are kind of slipping out of hand. And then there is also an economic struggle involved. So it's like what nationalist politicians often suggest is that the immigrants are taking away your jobs, but they are telling this to those people who are already at the lowest levels of the social ladder. So it's a fight often between the most kind of disadvantaged and marginalized groups about a piece, not of the cake, but a little piece of the cake that has been left over.
Can we say that they are threatening minorities with other minority groups?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Yes. They're threatening marginalized people within society with immigrants and kind of suggesting that these immigrants are the biggest threat to the existence of these poorer people within society.
Is it true? Is it true that there is a rise of nationalism in Europe and the world, and how does it go together with the inclusion and integration of migrants?
I think there is a rise in nationalism, particularly we can see it also with the pandemic. It has become even bigger, the nationalist wave that has been not only Europe, but I think across the world, you see the signs of an increased nationalism, closed borders, a stronger focus on the national benefits, and so on and so forth. Yes, I see that threat, but at the same time, we are living in a world where you don't have just one current, one trend. We see also a lot of counter trends. We see a rise of an anti-racist movement. Black Lives Matter movement has gained a huge impetus in the United States after the murder of George Floyd. And we see even the repercussions of this movement or this event in the US. We could even observe that here in Vienna, where 30,000 young people went into the streets to protest against racism within the police and so on. So you see, yes, there is a rise in nationalism, but at the same time, you see also a rise of a movement where people fight for liberal rights, inclusion, and diversity. And I think we're going, again, this is a challenging and very interesting time, but we can't say there is only nationalism on the rise. We see also a counter movement that is on the rise. There's also much more awareness about the inclusion of women in decision-making processes, the inclusion of diverse ethnic and other groups into decision-making processes. So we have a lot of different counter trends, but yes, of course, it's challenging for people with obviously different identities to be accepted in every situation and in every structure. That is still a challenge.
Do you think COVID-19 may have a kind of positive impact in the long run in that regard?
It might have. I'm not sure if COVID-19 itself has a positive impact on that. But I think that the event, I mean, the killing of George Floyd was something parallel, or which happened during the pandemic. So I think it's not only the pandemic that is affecting our lives. There is still something beyond the pandemic going on. And I think, yes, at the same time, but also to come back to your question, maybe the pandemic itself has also an impact, because I think we're all fed up of not being able to travel, to be only kind of confined to our homes, to be limited in our options and abilities. And I think that might have also a positive impact on kind of reaching out, and also being probably it will lead to a more open atmosphere after that. It's difficult to tell. We're just in the middle of it, but we will see.
We will see. And could you please tell us more about the situation in the academic and political arena in that regard? So what's the situation now?
Well, I think there are two different fields. In the political arena, we see, on the one hand, the rise of nationalist, xenophobic movements that kind of also gain a lot of votes because they have very strict, or they impose very strict migration policies and border policies and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, we see also, and this even affects some of these parties, an opening up of these parties to different groups, because it has become more difficult to gain votes and to gain majorities. So you also need to involve migrant communities as a reservoir for votes. So we see that more and more diverse, a diversification, so to say, not only in the electorate of political parties, but also in the functionaries and the people who are representing these parties. So compared to 10 years, 15 years ago, I think throughout Europe and also the US, I would say, you see more people with diverse backgrounds in political positions and also decision-making positions. So this is a change that can't be stopped. It's just reflecting the reality on the ground. Coming to academia, I think academia is not diverse at all. There is still a huge, I mean, there's a lot of talk, and also you see here a change that is going on, but it takes until these kind of structures and institutional structures are breaking up. And there are also very interesting projects and discussions going on about how to decolonize Europe, how to come at terms with Europe's racist part or history, and what it kind of caused in the world. So there is a lot of self-criticism going on, and the attempt to kind of refocus and read things differently. But if you look at the people in academia, it is still very much dominated by the West, and particularly the Northern Hemisphere. You have very few people from the global South being integrated, even though there is a call like we need to integrate more people, but it's a power, it reflects the power structures. It is the most important universities, the most influential, renowned universities are in the West and in the North. So, and publication, publishing houses, journals and so on, they all emanate from the Northern Hemisphere. So it's very difficult for someone in the South to become part of this. And so in that sense, there is still a little diversity and inclusion in that regard. And also, because we just mentioned earlier that the integration of Muslim groups has become more difficult, not only in academia, but also in particularly in the political sphere, because there is a constant kind of debate going on about Islam that is negatively connoted. And it's very difficult to kind of escape this very dominant discourse and have different inputs and show other faces, because there are stereotypes, and this is very difficult to kind of fight against these stereotypes. And this, of course, is particularly the case in the political realm. So it's yes, there are positive signs, but there's still a long road to go.
Cengiz, our time is already up. Thank you so much for being my guest and for this insightful conversation. Is there anything else that you would like to say or share with us before I close this session?
Well, I think I have touched on upon very different things that are all interrelated. I think what's important is to keep on fighting and pushing for the acceptance of difference and diversity, and for the inclusion. And we can start ourselves in our everyday lives, in our very close environment to kind of change things. I think we shouldn't wait for the big change. We are part of that change and we can contribute to that change. And I think that's important to remember. Even though we are just little individuals, we can do a change.
Mm-hmm. Change happens when we keep reflecting on ourselves and on the world that we live in.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.